I want to tackle a word and a concept in rehabilitation today, and that word is stability. And I wanted to explore what it actually means and how I feel it's a very misunderstood term in the worlds of strength and conditioning rehabilitation. So if I ask a room full of clinicians, what does stability mean? You're going to get some similar answers along these lines. You'll hear people talk about improving ankle stability. Somebody needs core stability. Somebody needs more shoulder stability because they're lacking. And you hear it a lot in rehabilitation, but not a lot of people can actually define it. And the longer that I've practiced, the more I'm realizing that many of the people use the word without even stopping to ask what they actually mean when they say it. So if I tell a patient their ankle is unstable, what have I really told them, right? Have I explained any problem to them? Or did I just simply attach a new label to their ankle and now they have something else to worry about as they're trying to move through the rest of their life, right? I have an unstable ankle. So the word, when you're using it, and instability can mean a number of things, right? It could mean there's a lack of strength, a lack of endurance in the musculature to hold a position. There's a slow rate of force development to land, jump, cut. It's motor control. There's some sort of pain with the position that the body's trying to avoid. They don't have confidence, especially if it's after an old injury or surgical procedure. Maybe they truly do have a ligament laxity. You don't see as much as you think. There's just not a lot of balance, coordination, and proprioception around that position. And these all are different things, but over time they just kind of become this one word, stability. And if we really think about that, it should make us all a little uncomfortable because we're labeling things to patients without giving them any real definition of what it means or any real plan to get out of it. And there's a quote I like. They say it's from Einstein, not 100% positive, but he talked about how everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. And this is how I go into any sort of programming for rehabilitation for people. And what happens is people have made the word stability simpler than it really even should be, because it's a systems level concept. Stability is, it's not an isolated joint concept. Your ankle is unstable, your knee is unstable, your shoulder is unstable, your back is unstable, your core is unstable. These are isolated problems that you're trying to describe. But the body doesn't work that way. Stability is a system level issue, and you need to think about it that way when you're trying to build a program for somebody. So if let's open our dictionary and we go to the word stability, you're going to typically see a couple different definitions. One of them is very straightforward. Stability is the strength to stand or endure. Okay, that means it can mean a lot of things just in life in general, right? The second is a more interesting definition. This is one we're going to explore, and the one that I think pertains more to coaching and rehabilitation settings. Stability is the property of a body that causes it, when disturbed from equilibrium, to develop forces or moments that restore the original condition. So think about that again. It doesn't say stability is prevention of movement. It says that stability is how you can develop the forces and moments required to restore equilibrium. So those are different things. And it should change how you think about exercises you prescribe and movements that you're having people do. And if we think about something as simple as walking is not stable because we never leave equilibrium. Walking is literally controlled forward falling. Every step is a disturbance. Every step requires a correction. And if we expand that into running, it's walking but faster, right? It's a different way of creating disturbance and needing correction. The decisions have to happen quicker in the body. Same thing with jumping, lifting, throwing something. The higher the force output, the faster something needs to be done. The quicker the body has to restore equilibrium when it has things that are perturbing the system. So none of these things are meant to eliminate movement. They're just continuous cycles of disturbances and recovery. And stability isn't just about preventing movement. And that's how I see it prescribed a lot and talked about a lot. That's maybe not explicitly what people are saying, but that's what they're trying to do. When they're trying to do a stability exercise, they're trying to help somebody learn to prevent some sort of movement. But in reality, it's how quickly can you turn around and develop the forces and moments necessary to recover from a disturbance. That's what we're talking about. This ties into a discussion I heard on a podcast with a high-level gymnastics coach, and he was talking about training on the still rings. And ever since he said this, it's really changed a lot how I think about stability and prescribing it to people. He said something along the lines of, the mistake that people make is that they think the rings in gymnastics are unstable. But that's not true. The gymnast is unstable. The rings are just there. And that sentence stopped me for a second because he's correct. The rings don't possess any real qualities of instability. They're just hanging there. What they do is introduce a layer of complexity and environmental constraint to the person. That's what they do. So they're presenting a movement problem that the gymnast has to turn around and solve. And an Olympic gymnast isn't successful because the rings become more stable. That's not what's happening. They're successful because they start to generate these incredibly precise forces that continuously organize themselves around the constraints that are presented by the ring. And that's a different way of thinking about it. And that's a system level problem. It's not a shoulder problem. It happens at a systems level. And this started to change the way I was thinking about a lot of the exercises that I was using. People would talk about introducing an unstable surface, which isn't really true. The surface is just there. An unstable shoe, an unstable implement. But that equipment isn't unstable. It's the environment changes the demand that's placed on the person. So the question is this unstable? The question becomes, does the person I'm working with currently have the capacity to solve the movement problem I'm presenting them with? And this is why I don't really think about stability as something that a person has or doesn't have. I think it is something that they can demonstrate and that they can improve their ability to demonstrate. Stability is a response to a task. It's demonstrated as a response to a task. It does not happen in isolation. So I really got rid of telling people that particular joints in their body were unstable. I just don't think that's a helpful way to describe it to people. And more often than not, it just leaves them more worried than it helps them. So one of the things I started to say to patients when we're working around these stability problems in a clinic environment or a gym environment is stability is your ability to create the forces necessary to reduce the noise in the system as you try to move. And I didn't say eliminate the noise, because there's always going to be corrections that are going to need to be made. They're just going to become more precise the more skilled the person becomes at the task you're presenting them with. And healthy movement anyway isn't perfectly still. Every repetition that somebody does in the gym contains these tiny adjustments so that they can continue to improve their efficiency. And the goal isn't to remove all of those adjustments from their motion. The goal is to make them smaller and faster and more precise as they get more skilled. And if you, let's say, take a skater squat as an example, it's a fairly challenging move for a lot of people. And you take somebody who's never done it before and you start to see the learning process occur. that front foot is searching for where to, how to plant itself into the floor so that everything above it can start to move more efficiently. You see their trunk making overcorrections to hold themselves from falling. The knee is going to start to oscillate a little bit to try to find the most efficient path. The arms, they're doing whatever because the person's trying to maintain some sort of balance as they try to figure this out. And if you look at it, I've put the person in a situation where the system becomes very noisy. There's a lot that begins to occur for them to solve the problem. But if I ask them to practice this every day for the next 6 weeks and come back, we're still going to see corrections being made, but they're going to be smaller, they're going to be quicker, they're going to be more precise, they're going to be more efficient. And in some ways, some of the things may even be invisible to the eye, even though they're still happening. And what doesn't happen, the movement doesn't become more rigid, it just becomes more precise. And that's how you need to think about it. So this is one of the reasons that I've become cautious with using the word instability and unstable when I'm in a clinic, because if I tell a patient, man, your ankle is unstable, so now I've created this contextual effect to the person. Whether I intended to or not, now they're just wondering, well, is this damage? Is it going to give out on me when I'm walking around on the street? Should I be avoiding certain activities now because this doctor told me my ankle is unstable? Can I trust this ankle when I'm stepping off a curb? And now this explanation has become part of the intervention, and I need to try to frame it differently. I might say something along the lines of, looks like you're not quite ready for this exercise, or this task that I've presented you with is more than you can handle today. And they sound similar, but they're not. One describes the person, the other describes the interaction between the person and the task. And one of them is going to sound permanent, the other one sounds trainable, right? So if I say your ankle is unstable, well, how do we get it? When is it not unstable? That produces worry in the patient. But if I just tell them, today this task is more than you can handle, now we've led them to thinking, okay, I can get better at this. And that's the way we want to approach how we talk and how we present people with different challenges in our clinic and our gym settings. So something that's a mistake I see in rehabilitation, something along the lines of, okay, we need to work on your ankle stability now. Okay. So how are we going to know when we're done working on your ankle stability? What does stable enough mean? How do we measure that? If only the therapist that's in front of you, that's telling you your ankle is unstable and needs stability work, if only they can answer the question, when is it stable enough, then we're leading you down the wrong path as a clinician. Because now we're, even if it's on purpose or not, this rehabilitation path we're taking is going to start creating dependence on the clinician to answer for you when you're stable enough. And the goal is to make this person more independent of your clinic. So again, be careful with how you describe these things. And when I'm going to turn around and make some sort of prescription in this area around improving system stability, I'm thinking about the highest leverage intervention that I can use in the moment. And a high leverage intervention doesn't just mean one joint, it's going to act on the whole system. And when we're trying to improve that body's entire system to solve a movement problem, we're going to get a lot further than if we just are working on one joint at a time, because that might not even translate to anything meaningful. So if we start looking at variations of heavy carries, different variations of squats and split squats, different deadlift variations, different walking, running, landing, jumping, changing direction, these are going to give us better bang for our buck when we're trying to work on somebody's stability than just trying to isolate a joint. These are the kinds of things that are going to demand that that entire person starts to organize themselves under these meaningful constraints we've put them in. And that's when we start to see things transfer into their day-to-day life. So the question that most people ask isn't quite correct. Instead of asking, how am I going to stabilize this person's ankle? Think more along the lines of, what intervention will most improve this person's ability to solve the movement problems that matter to them? And now we're talking at a systems level when we're asking the question. And those are high leverage questions, because that's where you can make the most impact in their day-to-day life and their sport and their activities. And it's a much more useful question to ask, because it allows you to broaden how you're going to approach the problem. So clinicians, coaches, trainers, we don't just prescribe exercises to people, we're giving them explanations for what's going on. And every word we use can change how that person thinks about themselves and what we're asking them to do. So before you say, man, you're unstable, ask yourself, what am I describing? Am I telling them something about their body, or am I trying to describe that their current interaction between their capacity and what I'm asking them to do is not stable? Because one of those things is going to create fear and uncertainty in the person moving forward, and the other one is going to help you show them that they have a path to improve. The goal of your rehabilitation plans isn't to create stable joints. Don't think about it that way. It's to create capable people who have stable systems, people who can tolerate uncertainty in their environment, people who can recover from perturbations in their movements, people who can adapt to changes in what's happening around them quickly and precisely. And eventually you look at the movement they once struggled with and simply say, man, looks like you are ready to do this now. And that is what improving stability looks like. So, if this idea is challenging the way that you think about stability, drop a comment. I'm always interested to think about how people define these terms when they are discussing with clients. And we just want to make sure that when we're talking to people, we're precise in our language and we're not just using words because we heard them from somewhere else. Because the words do matter, the explanations you give people matter, and the highest leverage intervention isn't always the exercise that we prescribe to someone. Many times it is just helping them understand what their body is capable of becoming.